Far from Salem, in the province of Elfdale in Sweden, a group of supposed witches confessed the following. They said we would go to a gravel pit, put garments over our heads, dance around, and run to a crossroads. There we would call upon the devil thrice, saying, "Antecessor, come and carry us to Blockula. Antecessor, come and carry us to Blockula. Antecessor, come and carry us to Blockula." The devil would appear in the crossroads wearing a gray coat, red and blue stockings, long garters, and a high-crowned hat. He had a red beard. This red-bearded man would call upon beasts to come and give the witches rides to a great meadow where Blockula was. And there they had a witches' Sabbath, the witches and the devil. I'm Josh Hutchinson, and this is The Thing About Salem.
I'm Sarah Jack, and some of our ancestors supposedly attended meetings of witches.
These meetings, such as those supposedly held in Blockula and also in the Salem witch trials, are today known as the witches' Sabbath or Sabbat. In the past, they were often just referred to as meetings.
The history of the witches' Sabbat, or these gatherings or meetings of witches, is connected to the history of the Satanic Pact.
This idea of the Satanic Pact and the witches meeting together began in the Western Alps in the 1430s. So these were parts of France, Switzerland, and Italy where this mostly came about. And what we know today as the Sabbath or Sabbat was originally called the Synagogue of Satan.
Now, these gatherings are not tales coming out of the diaries of women and men who write about their religious practices. These are stories that come up during witch hunts where allegations are being made against accused witches. And they were gatherings. Everything about them was sacrilegious. They ate sacrilegiously, drinking blood, eating red baguettes, eating red bread, unclean animals, babies.
There were often orgies and naked dancing, and the witches would attend workshops led by sometimes the devil himself. Sometimes his demons would lead these workshops, and they would teach the witches how to make ointments and poisons, some of which were made from the fat of the babies that they had killed, Christian babies, of course. And that has ties back to the old medieval stereotypes, very false rumors about Jewish people killing Christian children and consuming them. So this cannibalism, this sacrilege and blasphemy was a big part of these meetings. Like Sarah said, everything that they did, all the rituals and proceedings were meant to basically mock what the church was doing. They were performing church, but worshiping Satan instead of God.
In Salem, these stories became evidence against the accused. What we're about to tell you about these gatherings in Salem propelled the Salem witch hunt.
And these meetings in the Salem witch trial records are never referred to as the Sabbath. So they're always referred to as meeting. And there are at least 26 different records that talk about meetings of witches. You can find all of these records in Records of the Salem Witch Hunt. It's a very thin little book and has all the accounts from the witch trials. Now, these reports came from dozens of different people, both people who were involved, the confessing witches, and people who observed the afflicted people. Supposed witches reportedly physically went to these witches' meetings, but the devil put a mist before outsiders' eyes, so only the afflicted girls could actually observe what was happening at these witch meetings, other than the witches themselves, of course.
So this wasn't like a spectral accusation. The afflicted were telling on them for gathering physically, supposedly, because only the afflicted could see.
Before the meetings were introduced to the accusations against the supposed witches of Salem and the surrounding area, the witches were supposedly going out individually or in very small groups to afflict together. They didn't have meetings or worship the devil or any of that. They had small groups going out to pinch and prick and those sorts of things to the afflicted girls. But Tituba did say that there were 9 witches in the devil's book, and 7 of those witches were not yet known to her or anybody involved in the witch hunt. But from 9 witches before the first instance of a meeting, it jumped suddenly to 40 witches operating in the area. So you can see how that fueled accusations.
And the following accounts are going to seem like fake news, but they are the accounts that were included in the Salem records. They start from nothing and embellish from nothing.
Before the Salem witch hunt began, the people of Massachusetts Bay Colony were very familiar with the account that we led this episode with, the story of going to Blockula in Sweden. That was included in Joseph Glanville's book Sadducismus Triumphatus, which was published in 1681. So 11 years before this witch hunt happens, there's this major publication, and the colorful tales of the devil appearing in his stockings and long garters and high-crowned hat made an impact in the minds of the people who went on to prosecute the Salem witch hunt.
As you know, Abigail Williams' afflictions that started all of this were in the pair's house. So, of course, it'd be natural to weave her story of a witch's meeting right there. So that is like, I'm thinking about how everything with Salem always seems to they raise the bar every time. So you've got this amazing tale of Blockula, but here in Salem, the accused are doing it right in the Reverend's home. She sees a company of them eating and drinking blood, red bread, 40 witches. The deacons, the leaders of that meeting, were Sarah Cloyce and Sarah Good. And they used the blood of the afflicted. The witches were taking the afflicted's blood at the home, at the Paris household. And it happened twice a day.
The next story of a witch meeting that I want to tell comes from the confessor Abigail Hobbs when she was interviewed in the Salem prison on April 20th, 1692. She said that she was present at a witch meeting in Samuel Parris's pasture where they had red bread and red wine. Then, 3 days later, Abigail's stepmother, Deliverance Hobbs, is interviewed in prison. She said that just yesterday, there was a witch meeting in the morning. April 22nd, 1692 is this meeting. And present there are people like John Proctor, Elizabeth Proctor, Rebecca Nurse, Giles Corey, Martha Corey, Bridget Bishop, Sarah Osborne, Sarah Good, and Sarah Wilds. So basically, most of the people who had been accused of witchcraft up to this point were at this meeting. George Burroughs was the preacher, and he pressed the witches to bewitch everybody in the village, but to do it gradually. They had this sacrament of red bread and red wine like blood. There's some red bread. It was like that. And Sarah Wilds apparently distributed the bread and the wine. Now, there was also a table at this meeting in the Pasture. And at this table, sitting there was George Burroughs, and next to him was a man in a long-crowned white hat. So basically, the high-crowned hat guy, the devil from the Blockula story, is appearing now in Salem. And this man in this tall hat, he fills tankards with wine. Abigail Williams came out and spoke to somebody, but Deliverance Hobbs was conveniently blinded just at that moment. So she doesn't know who Abigail came out and talked to. Sarah Wilds was pressuring Deliverance Hobbs to sign the devil's book and offered her clothing in exchange.
And these aren't recaps of dreams people were saying that they had. These stories of the meetings are evidence. They supposedly were occurring, and those who are being questioned were having to answer questions about being at these meetings. It's so crazy.
All of it's fiction, basically. This never happened, these meetings. So people are telling stories. This supposedly happens, these meetings, in Samuel Parris's pasture, right at the parsonage, which is in the center of Salem Village. They also happen in Andover at William Chandler's garrison, also just in a field in the open. And as we said, meetings were held at noon sometimes, just broad daylight, clear weather, and somehow nobody saw them except for Abigail Williams and the people that were directly involved in the meetings, the accused witches. These accounts set down the basics of what happened at the witch meetings in Salem and Andover, though the numbers of people in attendance and many more names were added as this went on. So the conspiracy of the devil and the witches kept growing with each telling of the witch meetings, but most of the details were the same. They would fly in or be carried in by the devil, often on poles, sometimes on his back. He would be carrying a witch on either side on a pole, and they would fly above the treetops to get to these meetings. And then there would be a preacher. Sometimes there were two ministers. There were women witches serving as deacons. They were handing out red wine like blood and red bread like bloody bread, or what was in this bread exactly, we don't know, but they kept talking about it. So obviously it was important. Of course, it symbolizes the sacrament of the Eucharist, communion in a Christian church. The witches and the devil basically do the same things that God and his church does. They just do it evilly and wickedly and sacrilegious and blasphemously. So that's basically what happens at these witch meetings in Salem and Andover during the Salem witch trials.
This was super fun talking about these alleged witch gatherings. The fun doesn't have to end here. Come check us out on Patreon. Come see the extra content that we have there for you. Come tell us what your favorite part of these stories is. Write your own story about witches gathering in Salem. What would that be like?
Yeah, post that in the chat. We'll comment back on it. We'll have a little discussion about Witches Sabbath on Patreon. So go to patreon.com/aboutsalem. For transcripts of the records that we talked about today, you can go to salem.lib.virginia.edu and see the University of Virginia's Salem Witch Trials project, read the transcripts, look at copies of the images of the originals themselves.